0 to 100 is a podcast dedicated to bringing you quality conversations and insights on resiliency in physical, mental, social, and spiritual fitness through engaging discussions with those in the military and beyond.
Hello and welcome to the podcast. I'm Steve. I'm joined by my co-host Mark. And today we have another wonderful guest with us that I'm quite certain is only going to strengthen this series of interviews and really seek to highlight stories of resiliency, stories of physical, mental, spiritual, and social fitness, stories that when faced with really difficult situations in life, finding a path forward toward healing, recovery, and even thriving. Well, let me set the stage for our guest today. Mr. Phil Downer is with us, and I want you to imagine, if you will, that at a very young age, being inserted into the violence of combat as a machine gunner for Hotel Company, 2nd Battalion, 5th Marines in Vietnam from 1967 to 1968. Well, Machine Gunner Downer's company, Hotel 25, was the very company featured in the award-winning movie Full Metal Jacket, which chronicled their combat engagements. Mr. Phil Downer is very, very passionate, I can tell you, about sharing the many life lessons that he learned from serving in the Marine Corps and coming home. So without any further words, Phil, welcome to the podcast. We're so glad to have you with us.
Well, thank you very much. And it is a pleasure to be with all of you. And I'll never forget coming home. No one understood. No one cared. No one asked questions. They didn't know what to say. The war was still going on. I was told in Okinawa to throw my sea bag in a corner of the garage and never mentioned I went to Vietnam. That's what I did. I went back to school. I worked hard. I was a lousy student, sloppy, lazy, incompetent, terrible leader, slept through my classes, wasted a good career opportunity at a school, flunked out, joined the Marines. And when I was slapped up against the wall by the drill instructor that first time in boot camp, I realized that maybe I'd made a mistake. But actually, it was a great thing to happen to me because I changed. I learned so much. I learned things that helped me the rest of my life, but also I was damaged by things that have haunted me much of my life. I'm going to talk about both of those and some of the ways I found to find resiliency and peace in some of the trauma and horror that I've been through. I grew up in a home with a lot of combat. My mom and my dad were had a difficult marriage. Both good people, but bad circumstances, some bad conduct. My dad was off at night. My mom attempted suicide twice. I found her once at 10 years old in a pool of blood at the bottom of the stairs, and fear just gripped my soul. I'm like a lot of young men and women in the Marine Corps and joining the Marine Corps right now that have come through combat well before they ever were trained with a weapon. Their combat came as a little girl expecting to trust her uncle, finding out she was a victim, and a little boy being assaulted and beat up by a neighbor. Whatever it might be, I don't know what your story is, but we all have one. Most of us have one of pain and of hurt and loneliness. And so we come to the Marine Corps with all that, and then that's compounded with the horror of war, finding our friends full of holes. And then some people going and getting hurt. We didn't get to go. We have survivor's guilt because we never left. Some of you never left the continental United States, and you feel badly about that. Well, the combat was difficult. I became a 2nd Battalion, 5th Marine machine gunner. And when I came home, I went back to school, got great grades, worked my head off, learned stuff I'd never learned in school. I went to one school for a 4-year college entrance interview, and it was actually at SMU in Dallas, and the admissions officer looked at me and looked at the paper, looked at me and looked at my record, and he said, you're Mr. Downer? And I said, yes, sir, I'm Mr. Downer. Well, I'm really surprised to see you. Really? Yeah, I'm really surprised to see you. I said, well, why? He said, well, from your SAT scores, we just figured English was a second language. Your scores were so low. So that's kind of the way it was. I wasn't just a poor performer. I was poorly educated. because I never went to class, cheated my way through school. So when I went back to college, first to junior college, I had to work double time. Some of you know what I'm talking about. You're going or have gone, and you've started at a place that frankly was not on your resume. It wasn't the cool place you wanted to go, and I was really angry I couldn't get into a four-year college. But I got to the perfect place where I learned the basics all over again. Then I went to SMU, and I was interviewed and got in there, and the admissions officer said, I'm going to take a chance on you, and if you don't do well, and if you do poorly, I'm going to hunt you down. He was really serious. So I worked hard, made nearly straight A's. I met my wife there. She was gorgeous. I met her in economics class. I walked into class, and I came early to cover all the hatches in case bad guys came in, hypervigilance, 2+1, and she came in late, as is always, and just without any care in the world, any sense of wrongdoing, she went down between the rows, banging everybody with her purse as she went for that front seat, center row seat, and didn't think a thing about it. I mean, just, hey, that's just the way it goes, That's life, and she just went on to get what she wanted, which was a front row seat. A gifted student, a beautiful girl, nice girl, great decision. Her only bad decision was marrying me. And we were married the first day. Oh, it was great, glorious first night. The second night, traveling, all the stuff going on with my high school buddies at the wedding, calling it a funeral. Yeah, my Vietnam buddy Ralph Crosley was there. My dad was off with women. I was good on the night before with the bachelor party, but he was off being a bachelor, which really angered me. So about the second night, all caught up with me, and I blew my stack, and all that pain came rolling out. Do you ever notice that the pain in our lives rolls out as fear, anger, and guilt, and just spills out all over the people around us? Well, that's what happened to me. I love my wife. The one relationship I cared about, I destroyed lock, stock, and barrel, and she started thinking about divorcing me that second night of her honeymoon as she cried herself to sleep. The first time in her whole life she'd ever done that. Well, we went on to law school. We did well. We both got into law school. We did well there, got good jobs, but she was going to divorce me, and I'll be honest with you, I was going to kill myself if that girl had left me. I would have been one of the 22 today, yesterday, every day of the week. 22 veterans or active duty kill themselves, and it's a chronic crime going on in our nation today with people checking out. Well, I was going to check out because that would have been the last thing I had ruined. It was really valuable to me, and I'd ruined it myself, lock, stock, and barrel. Susie was wonderful, but she had very low empathy. I mean, the war was over for me. It wasn't over. It wasn't even over then. It was going on. My outfit's still fighting and all that, but it was over for me. And I remember sitting on the bunker thinking to myself, if I had one hot meal a day, 6 hours of sleep, and no one blowing me away, why would I ever want for something else? I mean, I got it all. I'd never be sad again. Well, of course, I had all that and much more, and was lonely and angry. And I needed empathy and encouragement. My wife needed respect. Now, let me read you 10 qualities in a relationship, and you think about what qualities are the qualities that you really need and value, and then maybe think about the qualities that your spouse or significant other or someone close to you values. I've used this list with people that were with me in law practice and so forth. So they go like this: respect, acceptance, appreciation, attention, security, approval, encouragement, comfort, support, and care. So let me write those out again, read those out again. Respect, acceptance, appreciation, attention, security, approval, encouragement, comfort, support, and care. So I have a high need for encouragement. When things go wrong, I don't want people to tell me about how wrong they are and how we can fix it. I want encouragement. And I asked Susie what she wanted, and she said, well, I need respect. And so the next question is, okay, how do you receive respect? And she said, well, I Phil, and she kind of stammered a bit, hesitant to tell me this, because I often exploded with constructive criticism. She said, I just need you to be nice to me. Nice to me. Now, ladies and gentlemen, is that unreasonable? No. No. Is it difficult when we have pain and fear and anger and guilt raging, bubbling over our lives? Yes. Yes, it's hard. It's hard to be nice when we feel shame and anger. So, how do we deal with that? Well, one of the things I realized is I had left things with the Marine Corps that I should have taken with me. I remember I wanted to take my .45 pistol. I would have had to strap it to my leg to get through when I got out. So I didn't do that, and I'm very glad I didn't. But some other things I should have taken with me, I left behind. You know, one time, Susie said, you expect me to be, I said to Susie, you expect me to be perfect. Have you ever said that to your spouse, your significant other, your child, your father? You expect me to be perfect. You know, they really don't expect us to be perfect. You know what they'd like to see? You can kind of boil it down to 3 words: honor, courage, and commitment. That's what my wife wanted to see. What's a little honor that I would honor her as a wonderful, caring person that I was devoted to, that I'd have the courage to take on exploding diapers at 3 a.m. in the morning and help her. And just help her when the sink got full of that complaining that no one else had done it. Then having a commitment to love only her, that she would be the sole, complete expression of intimacy for me. Now, is that too hard? Well, it was for me. I blew all those. With someone I dearly, dearly loved, I ruined my marriage with ruining the core values. And so they're out the window, and I just couldn't get along with her. And part of the problem was we were different types of people. Now, let me give you 4 types of people. I've stolen a lot of good stuff when I speak and share, but this actually came up out of my own study.
Hey Phil, if you don't mind, I'd like to bring out for our audiences the part of that transition, right? Because there's a lot there that I'm sure people may be wondering, and that's relatable. Your transition from coming from war back home, and the difficulties, right? So, there's been studies shown that sometimes, whether it's in World War II times or other periods, people in war actually have less mental health issues. There's more collegiality, camaraderie, cohesion, a sense of tribalness. Sebastian Junger, the journalist, wrote that, right, about that in Tribe. I'd like to hear from you, and I'm sure some of our audience members are curious, what were some of your thoughts of being in the Marine Corps? War is ugly. It's probably had a lot of traumatic things, but also there's that sense of like, I'm doing something. Like I'm in the midst of this fight and I have a part in it. If you could just kind of tease some of that out for us, right? Of that transition a little more. Like what was war like? The good, but the bad and the ugly. And then also some of the transition difficulties. I mean, other than the American public, which was very unsupportive.
Looping back to coming home, I never wanted to go back. I actually did go back for a video called War Within in 2008, which was a traumatic experience for me. They stuck a mic in my face and asked me how it felt to be back in the very ground where I lost so many people. But I never really wanted to go back because it was a horrible, horrible experience. I can still smell it sometimes. I certainly hear it with certain sounds. I'm never the same for a second or two when helicopters come overhead. Helicopters, they brought the good and the bad and the ugly to us, They took out our dead and wounded. They often helped, but they often gave away our position. They often blew dirt on my machine gun. So it was a mixed bag. But combat was, it was organized, lethal chaos. And make split-second decisions, and some of your decisions are right and some of them aren't. You do the best you can. You begin to think, well, maybe if I kill more of them, I'll feel better about the ones they've killed on my side. And that never worked. It just brought more horror to the war. And the images, I don't know that you ever forget them. So when I came home, I wanted to forget them. And I tried to forget them. And I could have a day of fun, drinking beer and having a date and going to a movie. But then that night, the nightmares would start, the flashbacks. Flashbacks during the day, usually early morning flashbacks, but the nightmares were in the evening, sleeping. And the noises, it just never left me for a long time. Hasn't completely left me yet, but my wife says I'm more normal than normal people, and that ought to scare you. When I went to the VA, I spent a year with this psychologist. She said between your early childhood things with your mom, then your dad committed suicide on your birthday, and all the stuff in between, then the war. She said, "Sir, you have the worst PTSD of anybody I've treated for the last 10 years I've been with the VA, and I'm not really sure how you're able to hold down a job." Well, there were several things that did help, and one was a recognition that I left the core values behind. And I really had left the core values behind. I was semper fidelis to those guys dependent on me. As a matter of fact, I'd venture to say that every Marine that fought with me, whether they were dead or alive, would say they'd go back and pick me out to be one of the 12 they'd fight with again. I was semper fidelis all the way, always faithful. But I wasn't always faithful when I came home. As a matter of fact, I was constantly unfaithful. And that unfaithfulness just built more pain. Pain causing us to look for medication for the pain in the wrong places just caused me more pain. And my wife and I were very different. And that continued for a while, even after our marriage was restored, which I'll talk about down the road on these series on this podcast. But not too long ago, once again, Susie was late. And she went back in the house about 4 times. I'm ready to go because we're going to a very important engagement. We're going to be flying on an airplane out of Atlanta. We got to get to Atlanta from Chattanooga. And she's late. And if you're married to a civilian, you know what I'm talking about. They're always late. And so sitting in the driveway, I guess there was the option. I could have gone and helped her. Hey, there's a good idea. But no, I'm out in the driveway, tooting the horn. So here she comes. We finally get in the car. We're late. We're going down the highway at 75 miles an hour headed for Atlanta. And I decide, like you have probably, that this would be a good time for a little fit rep, a little pro and con meeting with my wife. So I start in on, I had 13, 14 things I thought she could have done differently and better. Had she done them, we wouldn't have been late. And so I started in on my list, and I just because I wanted to be sure she heard me, because she was at least 13 inches away, I raised my voice to be sure she was able to auditorily receive my comments. And to be sure she was engaged, I turned toward her and got eye contact with her as a passenger, driving down the highway, not looking at the highway, and gesturing and so forth. And my wife are very different. I came up with 4 categories of people. Now, these are generalities, but I bet you'll find one of these categories that is predominantly you. And if you don't, then my apologies, but I think there are probably fundamentally 4 types of people. The first person is the person that acts out of their mind. They're thinkers. That's General Rommel, phenomenal Field Marshal, Panzer Division commanding officer, commanding general. And thinkers' goal is to do it right. They think out of their intellect. Information is king. Well, I'm number 2. I'm General Patton, blood and guts, commander of the 3rd Army. I'm a doer. Do it now. I operate out of the will. I value accomplishments. I don't always want more information. I'm trying to make a success on the information I have. 4th guy is a guy named General Lewis Walt. I use him as the example. He was Vice Commandant of the Marine Corps, Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps. And Loved Marines. He'd just walk in the trenches with us and in the field with us. He was just an amazing human being. He's a feeler. So we got thinkers. I'm a doer. My wife's a thinker. He's a feeler. The fourth category is a gatherer. So the thinker wants to do it right. The doer wants to do it now. The feeler wants to do it with emotion and feeling and fun. And the gatherer wants to do it with everybody together, going together. Well, my wife and I are different. Your spouse is different. Your kids are different. So going down the highway, going back to that illustration, that story, I'm screaming, I'm yelling, I'm furious. And my wife, a thinker, you would think she'd just be quiet. Why would you throw gasoline on a raging fire? So, but no, not Susie. She's a thinker. She thinks information is going to solve everything. So she's going to give me some information. Now, do you think it was something I wanted to hear and I was open to? No, I wasn't open to the information. But her information was such things that she went back in to take care of the feeding and housing and care of our 6 children and paid the insurance, the mortgages, just little incidentals like that. Do you think that helped? No, it didn't help. That just made me madder. And so now I've got this person talking to me, making me madder than ever. So I decide to stop this nonsense. I raise my fist and slam it on the console on where my Diet Coke cup is and plastic cup, my Diet Coke full ice is, and splattered ice and Coke and cup chips all over the cab of the car. And it worked. It was great. She stopped talking. But I decided to try it again. I raised my fist, and what went across my radar screen was honor, courage, and commitment. You see, we have the answer to how we're conducting ourselves. How should we be in marriage? We should be honorable people. How about raising kids? We ought to be caring, committed, having the courage to do the right thing. Well, I stopped in midair and pulled off the highway, and she was gracious to forgive me, and we headed on to the airport. Getting back in the car, we realized that that broken Coke cup, plastic Coke cup, was not plastic at all. It was her smoothie solid glass, and I had smashed the top of it, so now there are these jagged, razor-sharp edges that I would have brought my fist down, my wrist down, with certain horrible injury. You see, sometimes we get right to the brink, and we need to stop and follow the core values.
Phil, that's a great story. I want to take a moment to just interject because I remember hearing you speak about these 4 kinds of warriors not too long ago. Before today, you were talking about that, and I remember just sitting there and I was just resonating very, very well with these categories, and even thinking of my own marriage, between me and my wife. Very, very often we have similar conversations because she is emotional. She's the feeler, and where I'm the one that's more of the thinker, how to get it done. And it's just not uncommon for us to have similar conversations, and ones where we find ourselves butting heads with one another. And I really, really was able to take that away and say, like you have talked about, is that we have to take those times to be resilient and take a step back and say, hey, I was wrong here. I kind of got too down the path of, trying to present all the facts of why we should do something the way we should do it. Especially being somebody that is in the military and has that military upbringing and background, to then say, hey, I think we should do it this way. And then that turns into conflict. But then being willing to say, you know what, it's better that we come together and that we get on the same page and that we forgive one another, reconcile with one another, and go through that time of resilience so that we make our marriage more resilient together. So maybe you're listening today and you resonate with maybe what Phil's talked about. You resonate maybe with the concept of you have pain and difficulty, fear, anger, guilt in your background from things that have happened to you, maybe trauma, maybe just life itself, relationships. And now you find yourself now in relationships with others, in the journey of life, in your Marine Corps, Navy career, or other, and you find yourself struggling internally and wondering, what can I do? How can I be resilient through those difficult times. Well, I don't want to give anything away further because I know Phil has much more to talk about that. But just wanted to just let you know that there is a path forward and how to reconcile that fear, anger, doubt, guilt, all those things to work through that, so you can be resilient in the midst of the difficult situations of life.
I am curious, Phil, how did you transition from, just dealing with your life, right? You went to law school, you practiced law, you're working on your marriage, and then becoming kind of like a speaker and helping others. Like, what was that? How did that transition happen?
Well, that's a great question because I was not a speaker before the Marine Corps. I wouldn't get up in front of anybody. In fact, if we had a spelling bee, I'd just throw out letters and sit down in school. I was just not, I didn't have the confidence. And when I got back, I went to junior college, and then I went to a four-year college. And along the way, I got into a class where we had to study a case situation and then present our answer to the case problems to the class orally. And I was petrified. Well, I thought, I remember reasoning to myself, specifically reasoning to myself, I have led men in combat. I have stared down the enemy, outnumbered, and performed. I can stand up in front of a bunch of college kids and speak. So I figured out the problem with public speaking is you have to know what you're going to say before you say it. You can't think about it along the way. You can't read notes and be effective. You can't think about, let's see, what am I going to do next? No, you've got to know exactly what you're going to say. So what I did is I wrote out the speech. And I said it over and over and over and over again. I walked around my little room there, talking about it. I talked about it with people, and I knew that content like I knew my name. And so I got up with my pointer, my flip chart, and everything. I got an A in the class, and everybody said, "Wow, that was great." Well, it's public speaking. There is no person that just comes to earth, in my opinion, being a great public speaker. Now, you do have people like Ronald Reagan and Bill Clinton, two of the best public speakers we've ever had in public life, but they both worked on and studied it. And if you go back and look at what they used to do, it's terrible. They learned the trade. And so that's what public speaking had done for me. And so you put public speaking together with wanting to help people. I just saw so many people making the same mistakes I made, and our marriage was healed, and we're happy together, and we've learned so much. We've made a lot of mistakes. I just wanted to share that, so I would call different people in the military or out of the military, like OCF and different groups in the military, working with the military, and say, I'd like to, can I publicly speak? Can I speak to some of these Marines? And they'll always say, would you get the Medal of Honor? No. Silver Star? No. Were you an officer? No, I was a corporal machine gunner. Well, we can't use you, And then combat broke out, PTSD and anger and rage and suicide and blood and guts and all this stuff. And my phone started to ring. We need, a chaplain called me recently and said, Mr. Downer, you had the worst PTSD the VA had ever seen. You destroyed your marriage. You had horrible things going on. You were about to commit suicide. And now you've been married 50 years and you're a senior partner of a law firm. We want to know how that happened. And how it happened was I left the core values and I found them again. I began to exercise them, and I've started to work on resiliency, which is another part of what we're doing today. And I'll just briefly say here, and I'll go into it more in the next session, but resiliency for me is getting my act together, getting all my gear in one sea bag, we used to call it. And what I do is I get up early in the morning and I go through my schedule, what's expected of me, who I'm going to see, how I'm going to do it. I prepare the things I hate to prepare. I do the things I hate to do first. I do the hard stuff first. I do the tedious stuff that I wish I didn't have to do first. I make the hard phone calls first, whatever it is. And I read things that nourish my disposition. I usually run an hour a day. Yesterday I ran an hour. I usually run an hour a day. And today I ran a half an hour. Now, don't be impressed by that because I'm barely moving. And I'm loping. It's a jog. And for those of you that are young, okay, go ahead and run for time and distance. But those of you that are out of the Marine Corps and your bodies are aching and so forth, just get out there. and lope around and get outside and look at this creation and breathe the air and look at the views and look at the sunrise and everything. It just rejuvenates your disposition. And the running actually helps us keep our weight down. It keeps our energy up. It keeps our attitude good. And it's something that's positive. Also, if there are things that your spouse or significant other that they do that drive you crazy, deal with them. Forgive the ones you can forgive. Live with the ones you can live with. Then make a list of the ones you can't live with. And I've had to sit down with my dear wife and share with her the things that I can't live with, that just are not going to work for me. I hate being late, and I get tension. My wife doesn't care. I mean, literally one time she was holding the door open. This is before TSA. She was holding the door open with the flight attendant to get on the plane while talking on the payphone at the Atlanta airport. I mean, she just is fearless. You know, she doesn't, and she never misses a plane. I don't get it. But I get a knot in my stomach, and it ruins the flight. It just ruins me. And so finally I said, look, when we're going to your friend's wedding, I don't care if we ever get there, do a baby shower, do an antique shop or a museum. I don't care when we get there. And I'll just show up, you just tell me when to leave and I'll be happy-go-lucky. We missed the plane, no problem. It's on you. But when it's my deal, when it's my board of directors, when it's my law firm meeting, when I'm going to court or you're traveling with me in the Marine Corps, you will be early. And I don't care what it takes. And I don't even say it I don't say it harshly. I say, sweetheart, I need you to help me. It's my weakness. I'll own it. I get, irrationally nervous about being late. I need you to be there. We've gotten to our little airport in Chattanooga, Tennessee, an hour and a half before the flight leaves. We've been at the gate an hour and a half before it leaves. And I said, well, bring your computer, right? Thank you, notes, do something. But I just enjoy being early. And so that was one thing. I think another thing is that, this is not men and women. This is not Marines and civilians. But I have some real needs for encouragement and intimacy. And my clock and schedule is not the same as my wife's. My menu is not the same as my wife's. And so, if you have a marriage and one of you is on a diet, you feed the kids. You feed the kids. If you're on a diet, fine. If I'm on a diet, fine, but we feed the kids. And I need Susie to be willing to understand my needs are different, and I need to understand her needs are different. For me, fast food restaurants, fine. Drive-through window, that's fine a lot of times. Susie wants kind of a 3 or 4 course meal with intimacy. Let's take some time. Let's have some non-engaging touch, and etc. And so we schedule those times, and we can give to each other the gifts of intimacy that is suited for their needs, because we're different. And then we have a lot of common needs, which is great, but sometimes the common needs are not as many as the different needs. Well, anyway, so I was struggling with this, and I was talking to my wife. We found that if we have a business meeting once a week, this is a marriage section we're doing down the road on this thing, but we try to have business meetings once a week. When I'm out of town, we get together, relaxed, and talk about the hard stuff, the insurance, the complaints, the hurts, whatever it might be. And so I brought up one. I said, I want you to think about this for next week, but I need to talk about our intimacy relationship. She said, okay, I'll think about that. So next week comes along, and she said, well, what do you want to talk about? And I said, well, I want to give you a hypothetical. Oh, my wife hates hypotheticals. She wants facts and content. She hates my stories. I said, let me give you a hypothetical. Just suppose I love chocolate. And I do. I love chocolate. I just love chocolate. And my problem was that you and I agreed that we would have chocolate out of our own factories, that we would not go to other places for chocolate. So I only eat chocolate out of my chocolate factory. That's with you. And when I travel, I'm surrounded by other people's chocolate. Whoa, a chocolate here. The magazines, it used to be sports magazines, are now Playboy magazine. And you've got this and that. And sometimes the only safe place to look for a guy that's likes chocolate is the ceiling. Sometimes I'm walking the airport, bump into people looking up at the ceiling because of the way people dress, and that's the airport, much less the beach. So I've got to be careful because I want all of my interest in chocolate to come from you, Susie, my chocolate factory. And she says, I just don't like this hypothetical. I said, well, just bear with me. And so I'm faithful to you. I always want to be faithful to you. I wasn't early on, and I confess that, and I never am going to do that again. But I need your help. And she said, okay, like what? And I said, well, I travel all week and I come home, and you've got 15 or 18 things you'd like me to do when I get home. I have one thing of interest. I have one thing I'm thinking about. The other 15 can wait. I've got one real big need, and that's my chocolate factory. And she said, well, what are you talking about? And I said, well, I bang on the door, open up the door, and open up the door to my chocolate factory, and it's closed. Oh, my. And, you got kids and everything. And here's my poor wife. At that point, she had twins that she was nursing, had a 2-year-old, jumping out of the window, a 4-year-old that's signing up for a cruise around the world, and an 8-year-old that's wants to be an airline pilot or something. Just all this crazy stuff going on. And she's been there alone without me. And I walk in and roll my eyes, and she's like, man, take a shower, take a cold shower. It's just not something that's on her list. But it's number one on a list of one thing for me. And so she said, well, what do you expect? What would you like? Okay, Phil, I'm trying to get this. Just tell me what you would like me to do. And I said, well, when I come home from a trip, open up the door, I just like you to jump my bones. She said, what, jump your bones? Are you kidding me? What if it's 10 o'clock in the morning? Fine, jump my bones. Midnight, travel all night, up all night in the airplane, whatever. And she said, well, okay. As a thinker, operating out of the mind, and I'm a doer, we got together. She said, well, you tell me when you're coming home, and I'll get the kids, and we'll get sitters for them, or we'll tell them mom and dad need to get some time to talk, which is true, and we'll bolt the door, turn on some music, and let's rumble. And it meant so much to me that she met me with a great need I have. And of course, after that need being beautifully shared, I take on her 17 needs, the screen door and the car and the insurance and the backyard and the kids, with great joy. And I just feel encouragement from her. And then also, there are times that she likes chocolate too. And her chocolate's a little different. I'm not different, but she likes a 3-course chocolate enjoyment. And so we have time for her. And then we have time together that we're both on the same page. But that doesn't always happen with most couples, that they're on the same page. So that's one of the challenges for us, working together.
That's great, Phil. Thank you so much. And, I'm sure that a lot of our listeners can resonate. Just if you're in a relationship where learning one another's needs and meeting their needs is so critical for making your relationship resilient. And Phil, you reminded me of an excellent book that if you have not read it, I want to highly recommend it to our listening audience. And that is a simple book called His Needs and Her Needs. Yeah. And it talks about pretty much in detail what you've just discussed today, Phil. And because it's a simple principle that when you're in a relationship, that if you purposely set out to meet one another's needs, that therein you basically make what's called, you can build an affair-proof marriage, a marriage that's rock solid. And that's the premise of that book. And but Phil, as you were talking, I'm reminded of a story I heard you once talk about of where you learned the core values. And that was in your experience with the Marine that you worked closely with in Vietnam, I think Crosley.
That's right, Crosley.
If you could talk a little bit about him and that relationship and how you learned the core values from him, I think that'd be great.
Yeah, Ralph was the best, undisputedly the best machine gunner in the battalion. He was fearless. He piled up the enemy, faced down the enemy and fought. It just was incredible in what he did with that machine gun. So here I come, his ammo humper, and the sergeant said, okay, Downer, Crosley, your new gunner. Hey, Downer, you're his. And I walk over, this guy I already heard about, is just famous, infamous, And I'm expecting I'm expecting boot camp. I'm expecting shut up, sit down, do what I tell you to do, because if you don't, I'll unscrew the eyeballs and pour rock salt in your holes. And that's not what I got. First of all, he physically demonstrated the core values: honor, courage, and commitment. He was covered with diesel fuel, cleaned a machine gun. He put down the machine gun parts in the wire brush and physically turned on the bench and faced me with full face and both eyes. And my dad never did that. My dad never stopped what he was doing to listen to me. Now, is that true? No, that wasn't 100% true. But that's the way I felt. And our kids feel things that we look back and say, no, wait a minute, was that right? Well, it was right some of the time. But I felt like my dad didn't listen to me. But Ralph did. He looked at me with both eyes, and then he said, when's your birthday? I thought this was some sort of knock-knock joke, like, you mean November 10th? No, your birthday. Oh, May 8th. So I turned to May in his calendar there and had 2 empty pages for what he called a squad book. And he started writing down in nice penmanship answers to his questions like this: where are you from? Who do you know? Who's your mom and dad? Do you got a car? Do you play sports? And so forth. And what do you want us to tell your old man if you get your butt shot off over here? Okay. And what do you want us to send home if you don't make it? And then he said, what's in your sea bag you don't want us to send home to your mom and dad? Right away, this guy had my back, and he built an ingredient that I think the Marine Corps travels on. Now, our values are honor, courage, and commitment, but undergirding those values is something we travel on, and we travel on trust. We can trust the Marine next to us, and that is something that makes this outfit unique in the world, in my opinion. We can trust the guy next to us. And so he said, you know, you're valuable to me. I care about you. I'm glad you're here. I need you. We're going to be interchangeable parts. We're going to be so good, we're going to get out of this war in one piece. So he said a lot of things I hadn't heard before in any Marine Corps experience or school or anything else. He needs me. He wants me to be here. He is going to help me be the machine gunner I want to be. Wow, unbelievable. Well, that trust was superficial that day, but it became cemented about 3 weeks later. We're on the side of a hill, middle of the day. The enemy's not coming out. We're thinking it's going to be routine. That's when things happen, isn't it? During routine moments. Well, we're going up the side of the hill. There are 13 of us, 2 teams, a radio and a machine gun team, Crosley and me. And suddenly the enemy coming right down the valley, about 300 yards below us, and they don't see us. They're going down the trail, and we're going down the ridge parallel to one another. We see them, they don't see us, and there's no place to get down. It was a burned out hill. So Crosley just puts on his hip the pig. We called it the pig, the M60. Pop, 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 pop. He's knocking him down. I'm feeding him ammo. Things are going great. We went through the first belt, and we're killing them. And then suddenly, well, you know, ma'am, sir, listening, when your life is going great, things are really going well, what happens? Well, you hit a jam. Your life jams, your family jams, your wife gets in a jam, you get in a jam, your marriage, your unit, whatever it might be, your promotion, whatever it might, you get a jam. And that's how we need to react well with the core values. That is a moment that people will always remember. How we did, not just when things are going right, but when things jammed, how do we conduct ourselves? And I remember going on a ski trip with my kids. I took them all the way to Colorado, took off time from work, drove all the way from Tennessee to Denver, and then on to Steamboat Springs, paid all this money for skis and hauling up the hill with skis and tickets and lifts and lunches that cost too much, burgers that were cold, places to stay that were overpriced. And at the end of the day, the second day, I'm exhausted, been doing this 2 days. My back aches, my leg aches, I've survived, but it's 5 o'clock. And the boys and the girls want to go down the hill one more time. No. Well, Dad, just one more time. No. And I give them one of those no, and maybe throw in a Marine word or two. I speak English and Marine fluently. And civilians will never, ever think it's funny right or justified. It never pleases my wife or family. And so years later, you ask about the ski trip. Do they remember my sacrifice to get them there? Not really. They know how much it cost? Not really. You know how hard it was to get away from being a trial lawyer, striking a jury the next morning, Monday morning? Not really. What they remember is Dad blowing a stack at 5 o'clock the second day. Is that fair? No, that's not fair. But that's life, and that's family, and that's marriage, and that's relationships. Because when we hurt people, the pain lasts longer than the laughter. So along the way, that's what happens. And so Ralph taught me well. And so Ralph, our machine gun jammed. 3 of the M16s jammed. We'd been trained with the M14, a real weapon, steel and wood. They gave us this Tinker Toy in Okinawa and a 3-year familiarization course with a weapon we're now going to go and live and die with. Didn't give us Q-tips. And 3 of them jammed, and the others were, well, the other guys had them on automatic. They're out of ammo. So the fire from our end was over, and suppressive fire is gone, and now the enemy's shooting at us. Lead coming in from every direction, not every direction, but all over us. And just snap, snap, snap right next to your ear. I remember thinking like it was yesterday. I was turned so the fire was coming from my left side. I was facing Crosley with the jammed machine gun. I remember like it was yesterday thinking, I am going to serve this man. I am going to help him with this machine gun. I am not going to look. My temptation was to look where the fire is coming from. I am not going to look at the enemy. I am going to clear this machine gun with Ralph Crosley. If I get my butt shot off, I'm going to serve this man. That is trust. That's what he built in my life in one meeting the first day. I saw the core values and I've lived them. And when I've lived them, I've had great success. And when I haven't lived them, I've had great failure. So I learned the core values best from a Lance Corporal.
In addition to this phenomenal leader that you encountered, were there others along the way that were mentors or examples that were instrumental in kind of helping you along?
Yes, I had a lieutenant who actually was responsible for my best friend getting killed, which is a story I need to finish telling. We went on Operation Essex, and I was a machine gunner and had one of the shortest life expectancies because we were the target on top of having the rat-a-tat-tat sound of the pig, the M60. The tracer bullets every 5th round lit us up like flares. I'd like to find the guy in the Department of Defense that put tracer bullets on a machine gun belt. I'm going to take him out and let him see how much fun it is. But it was horrible, so we had to keep moving around. But anyway, I got promoted. Crosley promoted me to team leader. He became squad leader. I gave my machine gun over to my friend, John Atkinson. So he's now on the machine gun. And we're ordered by Zeke. Zeke kept arguing. We're pinned down, 16 dead, 21 wounded. Well, 15 dead at that point, and 21 wounded out of 120 Marines. It was a Full Metal Jacket. We were the company of Full Metal Jacket. And so Zeke, our platoon commander, is talking to our company commander, arguing, let's go around the left flank and hit him from the left flank. Hell no, hold your ground, captains say over and over again. Finally, after about an hour, he said, okay, damn it, go. So we our squad picked up with Zeke to go around the left flank. And enemy opened up, and that's when I took a bullet through the bottom of my pack. John took the rest of it in his back, fell on top of me, and a machine gun on top of me. I rolled over and cradled John's head in my lap and tried to find a pulse, stop the bleeding, and he was shot numerous times in the back, and he died. He bled out very quickly. And Zeke made that decision. Now, I'd like to find Zeke and tell him that it's okay. I hope it's okay by now with him. But, war fighters fight wars, and you don't have perfect knowledge. Other people have opportunity and weapons too. So you make the best decision. He's a war fighter. He's trying to kill the enemy. He's doing the right thing. It just turned out very badly for my best friend, one of my best friends. But I have a lot of forgiveness and understanding for Zeke. Zeke was a flat-footed Kansas kid, man, and a great big guy, and always happy, always encouraging, and always somebody I looked up to. I was impressed with the officers I had in and NCOs we had in our outfit. Just fine, fine men. Too many of them got killed, but they were all very, very good. I had one, though, that was a real influence on me in a bad way, and that was a friend of mine who fragged himself to get out of the unit, and that really hurt. He was a mentor of mine, and he just couldn't handle the fear part. And one time I found his brother, and his brother said he just quit everything. He came home. That Purple Heart was not on his bureau, you know. He didn't have that frame somewhere. And his brother said he quit everything and died early. But that's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. You find it. You quit what you're doing right now. What happens is you find it easy to quit. You cut corners right now. You find it easy to cut corners, and pretty soon you're living a life that's bringing pain and anger to the people around you, and you'll find great failure. Because that is not Semper Fidelis.
Any civilians that stand out? Because after the Marine Corps, as a student, both in law school and then in law practice, that were kind of impactful in your life.
Yeah, I had a high school math teacher and a high school Spanish teacher. And in both classes, within about the same time period, they each caught me cheating. And I went to see each one of them. And the thing I noted about them, I've never been able to find them and go back to them. But the thing I noted about them is, I guess they were angry. I guess they were resentful. I guess they were lots of different things. But what I really saw was sorrow. They really were just full of sorrow. In fact, one of them said, I can't believe you would do that in my class. And that sorrow really hit me hard. And I was never able to go back and make that right or to talk to them. They were gone. I don't know where they went. There was another one too, and I hated this guy. I won't say his name. He's out there somewhere. I'll say his name at the end maybe, but I hated this guy. He was my drill instructor, and they parked us, and I now know they did it intentionally. They parked us in the sun. We couldn't see them, they couldn't see us, but they could see what? Our shadow. We weren't supposed to move. We're parade rest. Sweat goes in my eye, and I promise you, all I did was reach up about 18 inches and wipe the sweat out of my eye, and all hell broke loose. And this son of a gun drill instructor, not only did he make me do push-ups until I couldn't move, he made 79 other people do push-ups, the whole group. And it was unfair that they would suffer just because I made a stupid mistake. Even if my mistake was punishable, he shouldn't have punished everybody. And my mother wouldn't have done that. My mother would have said that was un-American. But guess what? Your mother's not training you to go to war, Buster. Somebody that's been to war is training you how to go to war. So he did it, and I hated him all the way out of boot camp. And then I joined the Fighting 5th Marines, and I'm out on a drop-off patrol. They dropped off 9 of us, and all the other company went back to inside the wire. We're out there. There are 9 of us. Wait till the sun goes down. We set up 3 positions. 3, it's an L-shaped ambush. Forward position, machine gun position is back, and then there's a aft position, so it's in an L shape. And it's routine. No one's going to come. You know, it's hot. There are rats, and there are mosquitoes, and there are leeches, and I'm I want to scratch. I can't scratch. I'm exhausted. I'm sweaty. It's just so uncomfortable, but I can't move and give away my position. And here comes the enemy. Unbelievable. They actually came that night. And they're coming down, and you know, the first position has the hardest part because they can't open up. They got to wait. Machine gun starts it. We got to get them all away. And so as we opened up, I realized that if I had scratched my eyes, if I had wiped sweat, if I'd scratched my butt and given away the element of surprise, they would have just blasted us. And that's when I figured out, and everybody would have suffered. If I had done one little mistake, the whole 9 of us could have been wiped out. And I wanted to thank that drill instructor. Your name's Roper. If you're out there, Sergeant, I'd like to thank you. And everything I did that night, I learned in boot camp. And so I really appreciate that sergeant taking the time to teach me what I needed to know, even though I didn't like it. It was hard, you know, he didn't have to waste time with me. saved my life. But there've been a lot of other people too. I went to work for two great lawyers that gave me a chance, and I worked hard and I made a lot of mistakes, and I they stuck with me. I became their partner.
How was that journey as a lawyer? Like, I know there are people that were prior military that go into sports, right?
Right.
Sports is kind of a combat.
Right.
So was it like that for you, where
Oh yeah,
the legal process was combat?
yeah, absolutely. Oh, instead of jumping out of helicopters shooting bad guys, I'm jumping out of Delta Airlines suing bad guys.
Yeah,
It was
yeah.
perfect. I always represented innocent people too.
Yeah.
I'm kidding, but no, I mean, no, it's great.
Yeah.
I mean, combat. You know, it's the that moment when you're on the airstrip. You're checking your gear and you're checking your guys, and you know where you're going to go. You know it's going to be a bad day, probably. And the helicopters start coming in. There's a certain feeling you get. And then when you jump out of that helicopter, especially in a hot LZ, there's a feeling you get that is, I won't say it's supernatural, but it is unnatural. It is a feeling of exhilaration, of confidence, of now I'm finally in the fight. It's one you've been looking forward to, and now it's here, and it's exciting moment. And of course, it can turn to a lot of pain and different things, and you need to be sure that you cherish that moment and are able to restore that, because you can get beaten down in law practice, beaten down in life, beaten down in combat. You've got to be resilient. So what you've got to do with resiliency is you got to go back, and I'll speak to the audience through the pain and the hurt and the guilt, the fear, anger you have right now. I want you to think about that. You got that in your pack, and you know what? Your pack's too heavy. The pack is too heavy for you to successfully make this next hump, we'd call it in the Marine Corps, this next hike, the civilian would say. And what you've got to do is empty your pack. I'd suggest you empty it right now. Take it from an old guy. Dump out that stuff. Don't dump out the lessons you learned from the mistakes. Don't dump out the lessons you learned from people being unfair to you. Cherish those, learn from those, but dump out the fear, anger, guilt, and pain. And I'd encourage you to do that and leave it right here, because your pack's too heavy. And I ruined birthdays thinking about John. I ruined Christmas being angry at my kids. And just because they were, you know what they were? You know what my kids were? They were kids. Yeah, that's what they were. They were kids. And I'd come home without any patience and worn out and mentally exhausted and not be willing to let them be kids. And that was painful. So I had to learn some things about family. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But let your kids be kids and empty your pack so that you can be a child, not a child, but a kid with them again too. Have some fun.
Well, Phil, maybe that's a good point of transition. I know one of the topics we wanted to talk about today is a topic that is really rampant in society. It's also rampant in our military culture. One of the things that we're seeing is that, and I don't have the statistics right in front of me, but that we have the numbers of service members who have died in combat, but that it's an even greater number that are dying because of they're taking their own life, which you talked a little bit about your fellow Marine who did that. And I know that's one of the topics we wanted to hit on today. So if we could, let's transition to the topic of suicide and what it is that you wanted to share with our listening audience today on that topic.
Yeah, I think my numbers are right, that since 9/11 we've lost over 7,000 combat deaths. And since 9/11, I think the number is 40,000 suicides. I need to check those numbers, but I think those are the numbers that are talked about. And of course, it's difficult. And also, there are lots of ways to commit suicide. You can commit marital suicide, financial suicide, health suicide, different things. But suicide, what we're really talking about is with a bullet, typically. And I know a lot about suicide, and I speak on it quite a bit. People say, well, Mr. Downer, what do you know about suicide? And I said, well, not very much. My mom attempted twice. I found her twice after 2 attempted suicides. I found my father committed suicide on my birthday. I thought about it 1,000 times. I finally understood the root cause of suicide and the cures of suicide and practice them because I still am somebody who can become discouraged, and discouragement can lead to I'm no good, I can't do this. Depression, and depression can lead to, I'm really a mess, I don't belong, no one cares about me, I might as well just check out. And you go down that spiral downhill. I need to be alone, I need to get away. You go down that spiral downhill, you become very vulnerable to suicide. So I don't let myself go down that direction, but I have in the past considered suicide 1,000 times probably, or thought about it. And I studied a guy named Dr. Lerner on this and his principles. I put together some of my own. And I've come up with SCAB. SCAB is a hardening of skin that nurtures and protects a wound. And if that scab is protecting infection, then under that scab is a pussy, growing, dangerous infection. And what happens is we have our emotional scabs, and we've got them covered up with some sort of protective covering that maybe we drink, maybe we use drugs, maybe we use other things to kind of artificially cover up that wound. That infection is covered by a scab that we've created in our life. Well, something pulls that scab off and the pus comes out. I want you to write down that word scab because that is a symbol of the 5 lies of suicide. The first lie of suicide is that we have shame. I don't know what your shame is, but a lot of people have shame. You get it when a neighbor wouldn't come to dinner because you're of a different class or race or background than the neighbor. And they looked at you, the way you looked, the way you dressed, the way you drove, who your father was, what your father had done, what your older brother had done. I don't know what your scab might be as far as shame. Sometimes we have shame because we've never had a problem. I know people have never had a problem, never went to war. They trained for war, and other people went and died, and they feel badly because they're ashamed of the fact that I've got people. Just the other day, a guy said, well, I'm only a reservist. Well, what do you mean you're only a reservist? What you've done is you've served your country where you've been called to serve. You've done it honorably. You've made a lot of rank. You've done well, and live your career. So one of the messages with shame is live your career, live your life. Stop comparing and stop letting people compare you. I got out of I was in the Marine Corps, and a guy here at MCRD San Diego said, oh, you've only been here, this is your first day? Well, I've been here a week. Wow, a whole week. Well, then I was there a month. The guy said, well, I've been here 2 months. Oh, you're in boot camp? I'm an ITR. There's always somebody ahead of you. When I got out of the Marine Corps, the guy said, when'd you get out? I just got out. Oh, well, I've been out a month. And there's always somebody ahead of you. So number one, embrace who you are. If there's something when you look in the mirror, look in your life that gives you pain or you don't like, fix it. Just fix it. Now, if you can't fix it, own it. Own it. I know a guy that is just, no doubt about it, the guy's skinny. He's just skinny. He just is a thin type person, not mid body style or hefty, but he's just skinny. And he's always felt badly about being skinny. I saw him the other day, and this guy is ripped. He is the most fit guy. I mean, he's rippled with muscle and ripped. He still wears the same suit size, pretty much, but he's improved on what he didn't like about himself. Now, there's some things he'll never change. The things you can't change, just own. Just own. That's the way you're made. That's who you are. Just own them and find a way to turn it on. Turn it to a positive. So anyway, clean out your closet if it's a mess. Clean out your car if it's a mess. Get prepared. Be first on time. Get an A in that test. Stop sleeping the night before. Get some good grades. So shame is one. Okay, scab, SC. C, life is cheap. And for war fighters, life is cheap. We take life. The Coast Guard saves life. Well, we take life. So sometimes we think life is cheap. It's not cheap. Crosley gave me value. He said, I'm glad to have you. He didn't pick on me because, guys called me a skinny cracker from Texas. He never called me that. He called me by my name, Downer. And he liked Downer. I like Downer. Thank you, Downer, for being my gunner. You're good at it. And so life is not cheap, it's valuable. Scab, A-S-C-A, alone. The first thing we want to do, we get discouraged, depressed, or down ourselves, we want to get alone. That's the last thing we need to do. We need to get next to somebody that cares. Spend some time with some, I've got some friends who just aren't encouraged. They're nice people, but they're just not encouraging. They will talk about all the problems of the world. And after coming from a conversation, I had one the other day with a guy, last night, with a guy, a dear friend of mine for a lot of years, and he just named every bad thing in America and the world. And I'm like, whoa, I can't deal with that. I can't fix Russia. I can't fix Russia. So I stay away from him. And then there are other people that I've got a friend that I just call. He just Phil, it's great to hear from you. Man, oh man, what are you doing now? Oh, that's great. Listen, that's super. Hey, thanks for this. Thanks. Spend time with people who are encouraging. And then give signals to people. Let your significant others know when you're down. My wife knows not to give me something to do. She knows not to ask me questions. She knows not to deal with the issues, whatever it is. She knows to do one thing. There's one thing I need, and that is encouragement. And so she just says, Phil, I love you. You're a great dad. You're killing yourself for this family. You work so hard. We really appreciate it. We love you. You're a wonderful guy. And then she gets to the end of 4 or 5 things. She didn't know what to do. She's just quiet. She sits there, duh, and just quiet. And I just say him again. Say him again. I can't hear that too much. So that is being alone. Scab, S-C-A-B, B. First B is belong. None of us feel like we belong on some days because we don't. We're all different. Different sizes, different shapes. Isn't it amazing? You line us all up and you think we all look alike. We don't look alike. And we're not from the same backgrounds. We don't think alike. Twins don't think alike. They're different. And so we don't belong. So Crosley made me belong. Think about that. This is my friend. And, invited everybody to get along with me. And let me repeat that. So when the Gunners were making fun of me and hazing me, because I was now close to their buddy, Ralph Crosley, kind of the hero of the Gunners, they resented me. And they picked on me. Crosley, a Lance Corporal, got a hold of this, and he said, look, we got together the gun hoosh. He said, gentlemen, this is my friend, Phil Downer. Well, they all knew my name. And you're my friend. He's my friend. Gentlemen, you make him your friend, or you're no longer my friends. He ended hazing in about 15 seconds. His precise words were, gentlemen, this is my friend, Phil Downer. You're my friends. If you want to remain my friends, you'll make him your friend. And he ended it. So he gave me belonging. And then burden, S-C-A-B-B. Burden, the last B. Oh, I'm no good. I'm just a burden. I just take too much time. No one cares about me. I'm just a lot of trouble. Baloney. Baloney. Stop the pity party. People love you. People care about you. You're not a burden. You're a benefit. Not to everybody, but nobody is a benefit to everybody. Everybody has their crowd that doesn't like him, but forget those people. Stick with the people that value you. And so if we can pierce these 5 lies of suicide, that I'm in shame, life is cheap, I need to be alone, I don't belong, I'm a burden. We can pierce the thinking of suicide. Now, isn't it interesting? This is a shock to me. I figured out one day that every one of those Ralph Crosley gave me in the first 30 minutes I knew that man. And then along the line, when my marriage is breaking up, Crosley's on the phone. Downer, we're going to make it. We're going to be okay. Downer, you want me to come up there? No, don't. Okay, if you don't snap out of this, I'm going to come up there and I'm going to kick your butt. Okay. I lost a job. Downer, I'm here. Well, now I'm doing really well. Crosley came to my door, broke one day. I helped him then. Now he's a millionaire down in Florida. And we get together and tell stories and love each other. We are best friends. 56 years later.
Wow.
And Susie and I have been together, we've been married 51 years. I mentioned our marital problems. I better plug that in. That core values and some other things too really helped me mend a marriage that was totally broken. So I learned the core values from Ralph Crosby. Now, suicide. One of the things about suicide that is prevalent today that I can't specifically speak to this with authority, but I really think that young people today, when I went to war, many of the young people I fought with were raised on farms. They learned to operate farming equipment before they were teenagers. They learned how to take care of the cattle when they were 6, 7 years old. They learned how to fire a rifle when they were 7 or 8, maybe younger. They learned that men and women both work. They learned that work's not done until it's done. Sundown, maybe not. And they learned the value of getting good food and being hungry enough to really eat good food and so forth. They didn't live on candy. They didn't live on screens. And there was no reset button on a farm. You can't go out and plant late and reset the button and plant on time. No. If you're late, your harvest is late, your harvest is blighted, and you starve. Simple. And you can't do that today. You just hit the reset button. And so I think a lot of our culture, and not just the young people, but our culture is reset buttons. And what we're doing is we're resetting marriages. You don't like the marriage? Find another one. And as my friends have done that, I had a friend the other day, he said, if I had just done what I've done in my third marriage, which by the way is blown up, if I had just done in my first marriage what I did in my third marriage, I'd still be married. Mm-hmm. And some people find wonderful second, third marriages. I'm not talking against those. I'm just saying that marriage is hard, and if we would stick with one another as we go, we would be better off. Now, if you look at the suicide statistics, a lot of them, they say they were domestic. It wasn't the war. Well, I don't know about that because the PTSD came from the war, and the woman left because of the PTSD. So was it domestic or was it war? Well, I'm not an expert, but I think the war had a lot to do with it.
With that, speaking of like this generation, right, that did not grow up on farms, different environment, and perhaps they respond differently to challenges.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you get a lot of Marines speaking with you and asking you questions or sharing their stories. I'm curious what your thoughts are on, so what can a generation that is growing up on screens, that is accustomed to reset buttons and, right, just a different way of life. It's not their fault. It's just the condition that they're in. What can they do from your standpoint, right, to just kind of wisen up about resiliency, and what are some things they can do?
Yeah. Well, I think the younger generation, first of all, by and large, my generation was 80-20. 80% of the women, these are generalities, and so generalities are always wrong if you get to the detail. But generally, in my generation, you had 80% of the males were mind thinkers, unemotional, and 20% were emotional. Women were more emotional than men. Now it's about 50-50. And I married an unemotional woman. Her empathy level was at -22. I mean, she has no empathy. It's just charge. She's a corporate lawyer, my wife. And so I'd go to her for empathy. It's like going to a spark plug, or I mean, like going to a fire plug trying to get lunch. It just didn't happen. And if you want to put out the fire, that's okay. Unscrew, hook up the hose, put out the fire. But she's not going to serve me lunch. But my point is, that's a terrible analogy, but my point is that it's about 50-50. The younger generation is much more emotional. And if we would be willing, instead of barking orders, to demonstrate care. And now in the Marine Corps, we have the 13th week as a mentoring week. And that's still kind of under construction right now. But what the Marine Corps is trying to do with that is to get off the do it now at a high volume to a relationship that they could gain some counsel and some insights from their drill instructors as men and as women. And that's wonderful. That's a great addition because we need both. So I think as we operate with that, and I think if the younger generation would assess themselves and maybe realize that they're more emotional than other people. And one thing about the younger generation is with their parents or with other people, they're constantly expecting, this is probably true of every generation, is that we constantly expect our parents to be like us, to understand us. And it just isn't going to happen because, especially with my generation and our kids, my kids are more emotional, they're more relational, and I'm just not going to see some of the things. So one thing that could happen to be really positive, now this is not in the military, but just if the younger generation would be willing, instead of just expecting us to be different and maybe getting upset when we're not understanding and empathetic and so forth, and don't give them space and are too directive. And my generation's controlling and dominant, obstinate, and proud of it. And so maybe if the younger generation could understand their need for relationships with the older generation and for empathy and understanding, just simply go to your mom and dad, write them a letter and say, can we come see you? I have a couple right now doing this with they're married, they're doing this with their parents. And they're going to them, they're saying, they begin by saying, we love you and we respect you. And many things we do like you. But there are many things we're doing that are not like you. And you keep raising those points. And we'd just like to mention that could you support us in our lives and embrace the things that we do that are like what you would do. And then for the things that are different, just trust us. And just, we know what you think. You don't need to tell us again. We know what you think. And one thing for the older generation I would say is we probably never need to give instructions to our kids one more time. They got it all. Now it's their time to live it. But if the younger generation, and they are more emotional, I'll tell you, this younger generation is a phenomenal generation. They are bright. They're competent. A lot of them are wounded. In my generation, 10% were like me, and 90% came from pretty steady homes. They had extended families. And they may have been excluded from the white community because they were African American or Hispanic or Asian, but in their community, they had families and they were treated well, and they may have suffered racism or poverty or something, but they had a family. And now we've got more abundance, but we have less families. So the younger generation is more like me, wounded. And in my boot camp, about 10% were like me, and 90% were the others. That's my observation. My observation today is about 90% of the young people come from very painful backgrounds. Half the suicides in the Marine Corps and the Army are involving people who've never seen combat. So where's the combat? Oh, it happened in high school. It happened in 8th grade. So if we could be more understanding with these young people and listen to them, if we could show care and listen to them and win their respect.
Do you ever speak to Marine Corps leaders who see that as dangerous? Like, hey,
absolutely,
they're going to soften them up. We're trying to make them lethal
absolutely.
for combat. What do you say to people?
Absolutely. Like well, what I say to them is, how's that working? Because it's not working very well. I have a friend of mine. This is not what you described is not his situation, but he just is struggling because he became a high-ranking enlisted man and never had a suicide. He's had 4 the last couple of years, and he wants to know why. And so they're really looking at things. Now, he is somebody that really cares, and he really cares. But I think there are some that by the book, let's do it right and so forth. But I think that's changing. I think that's changing in both the enlisted ranks, from what I see, the senior enlisted ranks and the officer ranks. Because what I see now, I see a bunch of people. I got to speak to a command recently, and commanding officer, I do that around the Corps a lot, and speak to Marines on these topics. And the commanding officer said, I joined the Marine Corps to lead Marines in combat, and I feel like I'm a dorm mother. And I've got all these issues, and that take all of our time. And you talk about a time waster. If you have a suicide, or an AWOL or a sexual assault. I mean, almost kind of shut down operations and go into investigations and to find somebody, they look for it's somebody's fault, And I actually have a friend who's a commander is turned down a command for that reason. So I think there's some changes going on right now. But the changes I see is a greater concern about the Marine and a greater concern about the total Marine and men and women, that we can serve them, that they can serve the Corps, and how do we need to do that? So I see a lot of very sincere people working on this, and a lot of sincere young people who really want a great career. Their problem is they're getting very little support from home, and they're hearing messages that America may not be so great. Why go die for America on the media? And they're hearing things from our founders to our leaders and so forth, and I think they're wondering, well, is it really worth it to be in harm's way for America right now?
Yeah, I think that's spot on. All the consistent folks that I've counseled and that walk out of the office that I had the biggest concern for are usually people who are disconnected. I know they burn bridges with all family. They don't have any meaningful friendships, and everything is just kind of shallow, and they're kind of isolated. And that's the way they've been because they're hurt, because they're angry. And no matter what help I provide in 1 hour in the office time, I know it's not enough because they don't have what you're saying. So I know my time as chaplain, counseling hundreds, definitely testifies to what you're saying. So that's spot on. Yeah, thank you for that insight.
Well, one thing about the Marine Corps is I've found so much value in the Marine Corps. Would you like me to go down that line? That
Sure.
was one of the topics. Mm-hmm. Okay. I found so much value in the Marine Corps and military service, and I got out of the Marine Corps and went back to school, went to a junior college, and had to study twice as hard as anybody else. But I made straight A's, and people would say, Downer, the teacher said you got the highest score ever given on that test. We got the assignment on Tuesday, and the test was on Friday. How'd you do that? And I said, well, it's just BIC. What's BIC? Butt in a chair. I just sat there and got it right. Well, we heard you were up all night. Yeah, well, sleep and food. I don't need that, but I need an A in this class to get into a 4-year college. And they said, well, you're getting an A. So that's what happened. I just really worked hard. And I learned to work hard. We all learned at boot camp. We don't need all the stuff we think we need. We don't need, all the stuff we think we need, and we can do incredible things. We all did things at boot camp we never thought we could do. In ITR, the same thing, and of course in combat, that we never thought we could do. So we can do a lot of different things. And one of the great things about the Marine Corps was I learned how to do things in a competent way. I got into SMU and business school, and I went on to Emory Law School. And then I went on to be a lawyer. And I was the third guy in the law firm, grew to 60 lawyers with 5 offices, a lot of great people. I was one of the guys that, there were 4 corners of the office. I had one of the corner offices, and the rest of that. So I was at kind of the top of the heap. And one time, the junior partners came to me and they said, well, Phil, we got to ask you, how is it you do what you do? That's what are you talking about? Well, you've got these teams of different kinds of people. Yeah, I look on the inside. I learned that long ago. You don't look at, I don't want people to just look like me. I just want people good on the inside. And you'll work them to death. The trial lawyers, you work them to death, and they love you for it, and they all want to be on your team, and you win a lot, and you make us a lot of money. We want to duplicate that with our team. So where did you learn how to do all this leadership stuff? And I said, well, in the Marine Corps. Really? You didn't learn at Emory Law School? Oh, no, not there. How about SMU Business School? No. I didn't learn it there. Taking a bar exam? No. I learned at the Marine Corps. You're kidding. We didn't know you had such an extensive career. Oh, yeah, very extensive. I played ball at the academy, and I did 22. No, wait a minute. That doesn't add up. You went to the United States Naval Academy? No, not that academy. I went to a little school called Cheshire Academy, and we played 8th grade 6-man football. I call it the academy. and I did 22 months. 22 months. I had a 2-year enlistment program. I got out 2 months early. I did 22 months with the Marine Corps. And that's where I learned that. And you, Marine and Marine wives, Marine husbands, listen, the stuff you've learned traffics in commerce when you get out. You've just learned a lot of things, and you are a lot of things. And one thing I wanted to mention, I talked about marriage, and the thing about marriage is when I speak on marriage, the spouses don't want to come because they don't want to go to a military base and have an old Marine say, support your Marine. Well, that's not my message. My message is support your Marine spouse. She's a commanding officer, or he is a commanding officer. He's your XO. As a matter of fact, when you come home, you take off your bars, you become the sergeant major because you got a lieutenant colonel run the house, and that person needs your faithful service. And I've got a few tricks on that. How many of you have young kids? I can see you raise your hand all over the place. A lot of you have young kids, and they wear you out. And you get home. I had these young kids. We had 6 of them, and various ages. And the first bunch were twins and 2 years apart. So we had 5. Well, we had twins. So there were 2, and a 4, and a 6, and an 8. So I'd come home just mentally exhausted. I wasn't physically exhausted. We think we're physically exhausted. There may have been a time you're physically exhausted, but very few of us are physically exhausted now. I was emotionally and mentally exhausted. And so what I found is I drove around the block 2 or 3 times and talked about honor, courage, and commitment myself. I started to get my attitude right, but I still was pretty tired. So what I started to do was walk in the house and with all my strength just say, hey, how's everybody doing? This place is great. And just come in with a positive hello. And those kids would wrap around me, tackle me. Now, if I had a nice suit or something on, I'd leave that in the car, take off my silk tie so I didn't get the graham cracker fist around it, and just come in. And those kids would tackle me and would wrestle and laugh and would play hide and seek, would play rumba, or would do one of these stupid games over the top I dreamed up. And in 15 minutes, I'm rejuvenated. I'm just going great. But when I came home, I said, well, how was your day? Well, okay. And hit the couch, hit the TV news, and got a beer. I was done. I was no more fun. You couldn't get me out of bed to help, or get me out of that couch to help with dishes or whatever else. So it's all a matter of, are we going to show up with honor, courage, and commitment? So the Marine Corps really helped me there. And then, leading lawyers, understanding that we're going to lose cases. And that what I needed to do was to go in with encouragement and with empathy and listen and let them tell me what we could have done differently instead of going in and barking orders. And that just made such a difference. And then building teams, I built relationships one-on-one with people. I'd go sit down and one-on-one, and just what Crosby did with me. And just build a relationship one-on-one. You're valuable, you're important. I care about you. I care about the mission. Let's do the mission together. Let's get this done together. So those kinds of things really helped develop in law practice, being a CEO of a company, and being a father, being a grandfather, and where I made mistakes. And I made many with my family, with my kids, law practice, with law partners, different places. It's when I varied and deviated from the core values of being a man who operated with honor, courage, and commitment.
Well, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, Phil, for joining us today. It's going to bring us to the conclusion of our time. And as we are wrapping this up, just what comes to my mind immediately is, after listening to the things that you shared with us today, is that, well, we've really heard a little bit about of each of the 4 areas of fitness. We've heard a little bit of mental fitness, right? About getting your mind in the right place, about getting an education. We've heard a little bit about social fitness, how important your relationships are, and making those good relationships and working through those and seeking out forgiveness and reconciliation. We've heard a little bit about spiritual fitness, embracing core values and making sure that you're living by those core values to develop your character. And we've heard a little bit of physical fitness, the importance of just daily exercise and keeping that as part of your regime, no matter where you're at in your stage of life and how important and critical that is. And so just being holistic, right, in our approach to life and health and resiliency, And so, for those of you listening today, I sure hope that you have picked up something of encouragement to you today. I know I have. And so, want to just say thank you, Phil, for joining us today and all the stories. What a joy. Mark, did you have anything in conclusion, any concluding thoughts?
Not much, but thank you again, Mr. Downer. What an honor, what a great story. And for those of you who are interested in finding out more about what Mr. Phil Downer is doing and his talks, the teachings that he provides, you can go visit him on www.dnamilitary.org. No, that's the older site. Okay.
You can go to downer.org.
Downer.org, just his last name, DOWNER.org. There you will find resources and information on him. And if you're at a unit or community that you would like to reach out to him for speaking engagements, you can do that as well. But thanks again for your time, and what an honor. And for our listeners, be strong and courageous, and we see you next time.
This concludes another episode of the 0 to 100 podcast. Thank you all for listening, and until next time, be strong, be courageous.